Hi, friends. This is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and Saquon Barkley. All right. So, if you don't know who Saquon Barkley is, that is very understandable because you're here on this channel and you understand Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I have a theory. I don't believe there's a single person on the planet who is a genuine fan of both the NFL and D&D. I think the Dungeons and Dragons community is so unique, right? And so special and so unusual, right? That the only way that literally an NFL fan is an inversion of a D&D fan. It's literally an inversion, right? And I think you only have to go back to the 80s. Like the D&D guy was walking down the hall with his Dungeon Master Guide in his hand, and the jock quarterback was the one who would knock it out of his hand and mock him for it, right? Like, you only have to go back to the 80s. And honestly, I wish this... So first of all of this has changed, but the world doesn't recognize it changed, right? Like, the word nerd has no meaning anymore. Nerd just means, hey, I'm going to be your boss, right? Like, and you're, thanks, right? Like, but it doesn't... And so this change has happened, but it hasn't been acknowledged. So one of the deepest subjects in all of humanity right now is we are changing so quickly, and often our language just drags like a trailer with no wheels behind us. Or actually, the Cybertruck recently, they were trying to test the Cybertruck, and they would use these sleighs. They would use these like really heavy barges that are extremely difficult to pull, right? And like that's what Dungeons and Dragons. There's so much that's happening. So one of the things I'm really fascinated is this idea that we have this problem now where there are multiple marginalized groups that are no longer marginalized groups. They're massively privileged groups, but we don't have any language to discuss it. And our culture won't allow the discussion. We're like, hey, I know you were a marginalized group a while ago. Do you get to celebrate being marginalized when there's massive celebrations of your thing now, and it's throughout the entire culture? I don't know, like, we don't have the language for that, right? Saying, hey, can we take a minute and just say, hey, you're no longer a marginalized group, you're a privileged group? And there's multiple groups that fall into this, right? Like, there's groups where people are like, oh, these people are really persecuted. And they're like, aren't they extremely wealthy? Like, it's like, I don't know. Like, it's a thing. It is a thing. We don't even have the language, right, for it. We can't even have the language for it, right? So, all right. So I believe that the Dungeons and Dragons, so take the macro member, the 51% of the macro member of the D&D community, and take the 51% macro member of the NFL community, and they are inversions of each other. They are literally the opposite in every possible way. So how on earth am I going to talk to you today about Saquon Barkley, an NFL running back who is about to break the running back record of the... And trust and believe, half these words are wrong, right? Like, because I'm barely understanding it. But I'm going to have this conversation because of this unique situation I had this year, and I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, Saquon Barkley. Okay, all right, okay. So Saquon Barkley is a running back on the. Oh, and by the way, if I get any of this wrong, please correct me in the comments. And also, right? I'm talking about NFL football. I'm Scott Garibay. I legit have watched more NFL this season than I have in my entire life. I know virtually nothing about NFL football, except from the meta, right? Like, I don't, and yeah, so we're going to get there. We'll stay with me. But if you want to know the concrete reality of the NFL situation, listen to my words and then check for anybody who corrects me in the comments below. Because that's one thing that's very useful about the internet, is you could say stuff, and then if you're wrong in any way, somebody will run to their keyboard to correct you, right? And actually, I say that in a mocking way. It's actually frustrating, but it's also highly valuable. Like, and I have been correct, and I'm positive because of this channel, I know a lot more than I would have, because every time I've ever been wrong, somebody leaps over their couch to their keyboard and corrects me, right? It's good in a way, right? So, all right. So let's get to Saquon Barkley. So how on earth is Scott Garibay talking about Saquon Barkley, a Philadelphia Eagles, American gridiron NFL running back, right? How do we land in a world where Scott Garibay is talking NFL? Well, here we go. Okay, so first of all, I'm an evangelical Christian. I highly recommend it to you. one of the benefits of being an evangelical Christian is you go to your church and you are loved up on by your church members. They like, people just come along and they spread the love of Jesus to you because they know you're a brother or a sister in Christ, and it's really nice. So this gentleman came over and he's like, "Hey, Scott, I got preseason tickets to real time in the link, actual, we're going to go to the stadium and watch the Philadelphia Eagles play in the preseason, right, against the Minnesota Vikings." And I'm like, "Bet, dude, I'm in." And he's like, "Tickets are free. I'll even, he's like, and I'm going." And so we had this really amazing day, all right? And so I went and watched the preseason Eagles, right, live for free, right? Like, now I get Phillies tickets for free every year, right? I get Union tickets free for every year. But I ain't been to the link. I ain't seen the Philadelphia Eagles for free in 15 years, right? Because those tickets are worth a fortune, right? So even preseason, right? So I go, I have a blast, right? And this is wild. I know myself, man. I am intense and adamant, and I am absolutely intense and adamant more about D&D than any other thing. I'm also cantankerous and curmudgeonly, right? Like, I'm just not a sweet little fellow, right? I got some prickles on me. I'm a human porcupine, right? So I'm aware of this, right? So I am always shocked when everybody's like, "Hey," but this is super weird. Universally, I'm a good hang, right? I can hang out with anybody. And the reason why is I genuinely care. I look, because of Dungeons and Dragons, which has given me unlimited purview. Every time I'm talking to you, you don't know it as a regular human being, but I'm just mapping you as an NPC, right? Like, that's going to drop into Faerun in my next campaign, right? Like, and so it gives me a genuine interest in people, and I ask questions about people. People don't love anything more in the world than being asked questions genuinely by somebody who actually cares, right? And I actually care. Yes, you are going to be put in as an NPC, so there is a bit of agenda there, but I'm actually genuinely interested in every human being. I see every human being as a dungeon that needs to be delved. I need to know your history. I need to know your preferences. I'm fascinated by human beings. They're God's gift to earth, and I love them. I love humans, right? So there you go. Okay. So this guy's like, "Hey, Scott, had a great time at the preseason game. Why don't you come over and watch the Eagles live with me in my basement on my 65-inch television, right, with snacks?" Like, "Yeah, you gotta ask me twice, buddy." And so what's interesting is I do not give two rat tails about American Gridiron NFL, about American Gridiron football, or the NFL. I don't care. And I don't really care about any sport. And the reason why is there's no narrative. I only care about narrative, right? I only care about narrative. This is important to understand. I only care about narrative, okay? That means that it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I don't feel that any sports game has that. There's no narrative there. There's no story. It's just a jumbled mishmash of junk, right? Like, so I don't care about sports, right? Now, why did I accept this invitation? Well, one, when somebody wants to spend time with me, and these games are like 3 hours long, I understand that that's an extension of friendship. This person is saying, "I'd like to be friends with you. I want to spend time with you." Right? I don't take that lightly, right? The other thing that I've been really, really, really come to be fascinated by is auxiliary interest. Okay, auxiliary interest. This is a macro topic for Scott. You're gonna be hearing a lot in 2025 from me about auxiliary interest and how it connects to Dungeons and Dragons. So, okay, so let's talk about auxiliary interest, right? So I've realized there's no better way to build a friend than to attach to the thing that the friend likes. I have a good friend. They love UFC. I go over, I watch UFC with them. We've built a friendship. He's a real friend. I'm very blessed to have him, right? And I didn't care about UFC when I started. Now I know UFC. I really like it. I care about UFC, right? Because I've learned about it enough, right? Then I had a friend who was really into lightsabers, right? And he bought, this is not a joke, I think he had between $5,000 and $10,000 in lightsabers, right? And he was really into these high-end $300 lightsabers that would go, turn any color, make all the different sounds from every one lightsaber, but it would turn into any color, and then it would, and then it would map to any sound in any of the movies, right? Like, incredibly high-end stuff. So I bought one, and we built a real friendship around it. It was really cool. There's no better way to build a friend than to get into something that you're not into as an auxiliary interest. Now, before we leave this topic, okay, what you should realize is there are people at Dungeons and Dragons tables. I actually think most people at Dungeons and Dragons table are not there for Dungeons and Dragons. They're there out of auxiliary interest. And this is why, if everybody's having fun and talk to your players, is such bad advice, right? Because the reality is you don't even know why the people are at your table for D&D. Seth Sirkowski recently did this whole thing, thinks he knows his players. They don't know nothing about his players, right? Even after decades, right? Humans are infinite origami folds, right? And like we and people who say I know that person, they really are like just projecting knowledge onto them. They don't actually know them. And I'm convinced that vast majority of Dungeon Masters don't know why their players are at the table for real. They think they know. They're wrong, right? And many, I actually think 51% or more of all people at a Dungeons and Dragons table are there because of auxiliary interest. They don't care about Dungeons and Dragons. They have some other reason to be there, right? Okay, so with that said, I genuinely wanted to talk about Saquon Barkley. I'm going to split this one. This is part one. I'll start part two in the next one. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion on Saquon Barkley and ephemera. And the important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.